Okay, so let's get going here. Assignment number 4 we will discuss at the end of class. It is due November 9th. I made a small addition to it late last night when I was preparing for our course, and we'll discuss that then. Today we will talk about statistical conferences. A little follow-up from Leanne Marshall's presentation that she gave last Monday. I asked her a few questions that unfortunately we didn't get. I don't think we got to, and that is, I asked her, well, how many hours a week does she work? She says she works about 40 hours a week, but if she were to go into management, she would have to work more. So I found that kind of interesting. Also, there's a lot of job turnover in that industry, just as there is in the pharmaceutical industry. And again, similar to what I've said, there's a high demand for statisticians, and when that occurs, if you work someplace for a couple years and you want a raise, or want a bigger raise, or if you just don't like your job, it's easy to find another job. Unfortunately, I did forget to ask her while I was talking to her after class about what would be a good, what would be a reasonable starting salary in this industry, and also, so I've emailed her. I'm waiting to hear back from her, and also I'm waiting to hear back from her regarding contacts for internships at First National Bank. And if I hear back from her, I will let you know her responses. Okay, so let's talk about conferences. Okay, so every statistical professional society has at least one conference, and the reason is because it allows all the members of that society to get together in one spot to talk about research, but also for other purposes such as interview for jobs. Sorry, I'm trying to distract you with that door open because I can see people walking through the hallway. So there's job interviewing that goes on. There's ways to meet the book publishers so you can see what are the latest books out there. Also, obviously, I think I already said this, to present research, to have committee meetings, to have continuing education courses as well. And so that's why these conferences are important. Now, the largest stat conference by far is this thing called the Joint Statistical Meetings. I think I've mentioned this a little bit before in our class, JSM for short. It's usually late July or early August every year. And then this summer there was over 7,000 people. They set a record in Chicago for the conference. Just to give you an idea of how much JSM has grown over time. My first JSM was in 2000. It was in Indianapolis, and there was about 3,900 people there. And so, it's kind of it's common to set a new record every year in terms of the number of people who attend. Usually the main part starts on a Sunday afternoon and concludes about lunchtime on a Thursday. The name Joint Statistical Meetings comes about through that it's actually a number of professional societies who have gotten together to sponsor these meetings. But by far, the biggest sponsor is the American Statistical Association, the ASA. So, since this is such a large meeting, by far, it's the largest of any conference. I'm going to spend most of my time here talking about JSM and in terms of what to expect there. A lot of this set of lecture notes is based upon an AmStat News article. Remember, AmStat News is a monthly membership magazine of the ASA. And a number of years ago, they asked me to write up an article about, what new attendees for JSM should expect. And they've now published it with revision about 6 straight years in AmStat News. And so I've taken the important parts of that article and incorporated into this presentation. So I've divided this lecture notes into before JSM, what to do, during JSM, what to do, and then after JSM, what to do. And one of the first things that you need to decide is, well, will you present research? Now, if you're a first-year master's student, you're probably not going to have research to present, and that's completely fine. For myself, I didn't actually present any of my research at a JSM until essentially a few weeks before I graduated with my PhD. And so most students do not actually present their research until they're doing their dissertation. Now, there are exceptions. If you end up doing some kind of research project associated with your master's degree, well, you can present it. And we've had students do that. Now, in terms of the type of way or type of presentations that you can give for your research, you can divide it up into the three kinds of what are called sessions or groups of presentations. The three kinds of the main three kinds of sessions that occur at joint statistical meetings. There are what are called invited sessions, contributed topic sessions, and contributed sessions. Let's focus on contributed because this is often the way that most students get their start at presenting research at JSM. And so what you basically need to do is you need to come up with a title for a presentation and an abstract for what you're going to talk about. The research doesn't have to be completed, but you need to, or eventually you have to complete it, but you need to submit the title in the abstract in about February 1, February 2 to the Joint Statistical Meetings website. You submit it there saying that, hey, I have committed to doing a presentation there. And when you submit it like that, and you submit it as a contributed talk, you are guaranteed acceptance, meaning that the JSM will not turn you away and say, sorry, you're not good enough here. We're not going to have you present. Everything is accepted. And so obviously for students who are just beginning doing research, that makes sense then why they most often choose the contributed route. So you are contributing something to the JSM program. And so again, the main deadline is early February. And so this is an example of what a contributed session would look like at JSM. This is one that I participated in a number of years ago. There's JSM always has a website where you can see all the presentations that are going to be made, all the corresponding sessions. And in this particular session, you can see right there, my title of my talk was Tablet PC Applications in Statistics Education, Part 1. At the time, this was before there were iPads. Nobody had ever heard of an iPad. And Microsoft had come up with this concept of a tablet PC about 5 years prior to that. And so I was giving a presentation about how can we use tablet PCs inside and outside the classroom for statistics education. My colleague that I was doing the presentation with was Chris Malone from Winona State that I mentioned before. And we were able to get the organizers of this session to put then his talk that he was leading, Part 2, right after mine as well. And one of the things that we did do was we recorded it, and you can see a recording of my presentation at that YouTube website. Now notice here the time between presentations, between when they start, 15 minutes. So you only have 15 minutes to talk. That's not much. But in order to have enough time for everyone to be able to present, that's what they do, 15 minutes for contributed talks. So let's talk about an invited session. And also, I'm sorry, let me make sure. Sorry, I don't remember exactly when I talked about a particular topic. Okay, so why were all these presentations then grouped together? Well, whenever you give a contributed talk, the organizers of JSM, called the JSM Program Committee, will try to find similar presentations and group them all together into a session. So with contributed sessions, there will be 7 talks typically available. And you can see here the title for the session, and this is what the JSM Program Committee came up with, was Technology for Teaching Statistics. Okay, if I'm talking about tablet PCs, that makes sense. And you can see that all of them there, all the presentations have something to do with using technology to teach statistics. Okay. Now, invited sessions, probably about 10 to 11 months before JSM actually occurs, an individual will decide, hey, I want to organize an invited session where they will find maybe 3 or 4 other people who want to present their research on a common topic. This invited session then is submitted together to the JSM Program Committee, and then whether or not that invited session is accepted or not is just based upon whatever the committee decides. So it is a competitive process. I've only been a part of a few invited sessions. I think I've only even tried it only once myself, and my invited session was not accepted. But I've been in other people's invited sessions though before. And one of the nice things about these invited sessions is that you get at least 25 minutes to talk per presentation, so you have more time to develop what you're talking about. And then lastly, something in between an invited session and a contributed session is a contributed topic session. And basically, oftentimes how these come about is you submit a proposal for an invited session, it's not accepted. Then you turn right around and you submit it as a contributed topic session. Usually you have to add 1 or 2 additional speakers to it. And the reason why JSM likes a contributed topic session is because alternatively, all those presentations that you submitted together as an invited session would have been probably submitted as a contributed session, and the JSM Program Committee would have had to figure out, okay, which presentations do I put together in the same session? So essentially, since you are organizing the session, you are doing the work of the JSM Program Committee. In the end, you get about 20 minutes for a presentation. And it is still a competitive process to get your session accepted, but most of the time you get it accepted. So this is an example of a particular contributed topic session that I've actually submitted. So you can see me here. I am the organizer, and it was just based upon my group testing research area. And so what I had to do was contact all these researchers and say, hey, do you want to give a talk? Okay, so what does a session look like? Well, a session can either be a set of oral presentations or poster presentations. This is an example of what a room looks like for an oral presentation, where you have someone up here standing in a lectern and talking about what's on their slides. Okay, as you might expect. This is a small room. Rooms can often be can have hundreds of chairs in it. This is an example of a small room here. Now, excuse me. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Okay. Now, so that's an example of what an oral presentation would be. You're just simply going through slides. Now, a poster presentation means that basically what you're doing is rather than putting your presentation on slides that you can go through on a data projector, instead what you're doing is actually printing the material on a very large piece of paper. So this is an example of a poster that I gave at JSM a few years ago, 3 feet by 7 feet. They obviously provide, JSM provides a board that you can just put everything on, and they'll provide thumbtacks. So that's a traditional type of poster presentation. A few years ago, they started doing electronic poster presentations where they would have like a 40-inch monitor set up, and that's where you put all your research information being displayed on that monitor. Typically, you just essentially put this now on one screen, but you can actually cycle through multiple slides, you could say, but not too many. So with these poster presentations, basically what you need to do is you stand next to your poster for 2 hours. And people will walk by, some will stop, they'll look at your poster, and you're there to answer any questions that they may have. I will say that oral presentations are typically thought of as more highly than poster presentations, although I think the poster format can actually be more beneficial in the end because you don't just have 15 minutes to talk if you're doing a contributed presentation. What I've heard from in other professional societies and their conferences, often poster presentations are thought of a lot more highly than they are in statistical meetings. There's also a newer hybrid version of a poster presentation. Again, JSM is trying to get more people to go through for a long time they've been trying to do this, to do these poster presentations. And this hybrid version includes both an oral and a poster component where you actually do a 5-minute presentation, what's called a speed session. You do that presentation, and then later in the day, you have your poster exhibited. And you can see, for example, here, this is actually an example of what an electronic poster setup would look like in terms of the kind of monitor that you would have. Okay. So those are the types of presentations, and if you obviously go there to present your research, you need to know what kind of presentations there are. Again, for students at your level, right now, a contributed talk, a poster, or a contributed presentation or contributed poster will be the best. Contributed oral presentation. Now, about April, a preliminary program, a list of events will be released by the Joint Statistical Meetings Program Committee. And this is just going to give you a schedule of what's going on during it. One of the key things to realize is that, when you have 7,000 people at one of these conferences, there's going to be a lot going on. So in terms of research presentations, there are typically over 40 research presentations going on at the same time. Not all in the same room, but they are all going on at the same time in a very large convention center. I would say typically there might be 60 or 70 different things actually going on at the same time total. So 40 research presentations and then other stuff that goes on during JSM. And so it's important that before you go, or you don't just get there and say, what am I going to do today? Don't do that. Actually come prepared. So what I typically do is I'll look through the titles of all the sessions, and I'll say, okay, at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, this looks like a good session to go to. Here's a backup session that I can go to too if I get bored or whatever. And that's typically the way I approach it, so that at least I have an agenda of, I have an idea what I want to do, and I can, of course, deviate from that agenda if needed. Cost is expensive. The reason being is because, you're in these big cities, you're typically downtown at these very expensive hotels. And typically I spend between $1,500 to $2,000 per JSM that I go to. So obviously, as a student, what can you do? Well, fortunately for students, the fee to attend is greatly discounted. I think it's about $50, where I pay about $450 since I'm an adult. But that's just what it is. And so maybe about $50 for students to attend JSM, but you're still going to have hotel, you don't have student discounts for hotels, you don't have student discounts for plane tickets and stuff. So what can you do to get money to go to JSM? Well, your first stop should be your advisor. If you're presenting research, like especially for your dissertation, your advisor's name is going to be on it. And if that advisor has some kind of grant funding, they should be able to at least partially support you. At least grants that I put together, I always make room for funding students to go to these conferences. At UNL, if your advisor doesn't have funding, fortunately over the last 5 or so years, the department has been able to provide about $1,000 to fund students to go, provided that they're actually presenting research. And there's an application process. It's not too difficult to do it, and typically you hear about it in January every year. Now, UNL, does anyone know what ARD stands for? Sorry that I didn't actually write it out there. Agricultural Research Division, ARD. So, let's talk about this aspect. Sometimes one forgets that it's not necessarily immediately known. Does anyone know what IANR stands for?
Agricultural Natural Resources.
Yeah, Institute of Agricultural and Natural Resources. So, UNL, let's actually start this way. So let's talk about organizational structure of UNL. I don't know why I drew a... Okay. If there was like a Nebraska State University, that would be IANR. There isn't. But IANR has a special place in UNL's hierarchy. It's just the way it's organized. So we have IANR, and then we essentially have everything else. Obviously, IANR is mainly based here on East Campus. The Department of Statistics itself is jointly housed in IANR and the College of Arts and Sciences, which is part of everything else. Now, let's say that the research that you want to present, and it corresponds to also your advisors on it, let's say that they have a part of an INR appointment. If they do, then you can get one of these student travel grants to go. You can get it once as a master's student, once as a PhD student. In the end, though, it's not that much. It's $500. But it is fairly easy to get. I've had a number of my students get these before. Now, of course, you need to know, well, which professors have an INR appointment. Pretty much everyone in the department except for Kathy Hanford, Yuhong, and Chi. Everyone else has an INR portion of their appointment. Now, there is student government money that's available too, and for funding to go to conferences. And so, for example, when I was in grad school at Kansas State, what we call the Statistics Club, I guess we'd call it the Statistics Graduate Student Association, because they didn't like calling themselves the Statistics Club or Stat Club. Well, our Stat Club at K-State, we applied for funding to go to a joint statistical meetings where fortunately it was within drivable distance, and they provided some funding. We got a big university van, and this funding helped pay for the van and also pay for some of the hotel expenses. And so UNL has something similar, but you have to go through the SAT GSA to get it. Many ASA sections have student paper competitions, so once you're doing your dissertation, you can submit a paper for your dissertation for one of these competitions. If you have, so there's also something called the GAN grant that our department has. GAN stands for Graduate Areas, something else, a national need. Okay, and this grant, we just use it to fund students who have passed the PhD qualifying exam. And if you get on this grant, and Kent Eskridge is the principal investigator on it, So you would have to talk to them for more information. But if you get on this grant, not only does it cover basically you're a TA, but you're just funded by this grant. But not only does it cover your TA salary, but it also covers expenses to go to conferences. It covers books. It covers other university fees that you normally would have to pay. So it's a very lucrative grant. So, for example, I once had one of my students go to Spain to present at our user conference based upon her funding from this grant. Sharing a hotel room can greatly save money, and you don't have to stay for JSM during the whole time period. So, for example, most people don't actually go on Thursday of JSM to save money. Okay, so here are some important dates associated before JSM that you need to be aware of. Please look at this on your own. You know, obviously right now, most of you are not going to go to JSM next year, but if you did, you need to be aware of these dates. In the future, I would anticipate all of you will go to JSM at some point, and these dates typically hold. Let's see now. One of those and one that's specific. Notice the registration deadline. Now, I don't think it's as important for students, since I think that the registration fee is the same no matter if you register at the conference versus before. But typically, you want to actually register beforehand. If you do register beforehand, it helps a little bit because you'll start getting emails or other things through the mail regarding JSM. In particular, you will get your little name tag that you can use at JSM. Okay, so now what do you do at JSM? Again, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Typically, I try to get there on Sunday morning if I can get my plane flights to work out right, because the main sessions start on a Saturday afternoon. In terms of what to wear, business casual is what you see most people dressed as, but people wear suits. People will wear just simply t-shirts and shorts too. Now, typically in the past, this was more important. When you arrive at JSM, you would typically always go to the registration counter at the convention center. So what you do is you go to the counter and you say, hey, look, I'm registered. And then what they will do is that they will give you the official JSM bag. Because they don't think that you brought any bags with you. And you're going to need something to hold your stuff when you're at the conference. And inside the bag, there will be already some stuff in there, like the conference program, for example. And also a whole bunch of advertisements, like from SAS and book publishers and stuff. The main thing that I like is that conference program, where I don't look at the conference program at all. Really, what I look at is that there's a map of the convention center there. And so I use that because, again, if there are like 60 or 70 things going on at the same time, there's going to have to be 60 or 70 rooms at the convention center to hold everything that's going on. And these convention centers can be quite large. And so what I do is I just simply rip out the map of the convention center that's in the program, or the program book, and then I simply recycle everything else. Another good thing that you get too by going to the registration desk and what will be in your bag is that you will get your official plastic name tag holder as well that you can put your thing in here. Also, you will get a SAS-sponsored, what are these called? A lanyard? Lanyard, thank you. That you can attach like this, put it around your neck, make sure your name's pointing forward there. That's why now they actually upgraded so that you can actually have a two-sided name tag. But anyway, so you wear this whenever that you're in the convention center. If you don't have it on, you might not be let into certain things that are going on at the convention center. So there you go. Nowadays, if you have one of these plastic name holders, just use one you have before. I always have this. Have one of these that don't have the SAS on it or various other advertisements on it. And so now, if you have that, you don't really need to go there because there's also a nice JSM app that you can use on your smartphone that actually contains, for example, the map of the convention center. It contains the whole schedule and stuff like that. And so that's what the registration desks look like. Now, just realize, as you will see here, that I've taken a lot of pictures here and incorporated them to these lecture notes. I had some strange looks of people, or from people when I was doing this at previous JSMs doing this, but I knew at some point it would come in handy, and now is the time. Okay, so on Sunday there are some welcome things that are going on. There's a JSM first-time attendee orientation or reception. There's also an opening mixer too, where they will have free food and free alcoholic beverages. Also on Sundays, there is somewhat of a smaller awards ceremony that's just primarily for the ASA. And this is the reason why I point this out is because many first-time JSM attendees will be getting awards here corresponding to if they participated in paper competitions or if they've participated, or if they've gotten a scholarship or something like that that's associated with the ASA. You'll see these people being awarded here. Here, for example, is an award being presented to Chris Malone, as I mentioned before. He had the best paper of the year in the Journal of Statistics Education. And so here is Chris right there. In terms of social media, as I mentioned, there's this JSM app. There's a lot of stuff that's going on Twitter during JSM. Just do a search for pound JSM year, and you have some interesting things that go on there. For example, I've when I first had my categorical data analysis book published and was at JSM, because there's a lot of book publishers that are displaying their books, I said, hey, if you want to get your book signed, meet me at the CRC Press booth at 11 a.m. and I'll be there to sign it. Pound or hashtag JSM 2014. In the end, I didn't attract anybody to come there, but oh well. It was at least worth a try. Anything for book sales. So these sessions, contributed sessions, contributed topic sessions, invited sessions. There's a lot of research being presented, and to be honest, they're difficult to understand because unless it's like in my specific research area, I know going to the session, I'm not going to be able to understand everything. And so if you go to a JSM, they'll feel bad if you don't understand what's being talked about. My goal is per session to have one or two presentations from a session from which I learn something relevant to my teaching or my research. Also, another reason why research presentations are often difficult to understand is because people don't know how to give proper research presentations to begin with. Oftentimes they're poorly organized, or maybe the font is, let's say, so small that people in the room can't see it. But that's not the purpose of our class here to talk about how to give a research presentation. We can talk about that in some other setting. Well, as I said here, there's a lot of variability in the quality of these sessions. Typically, the invited ones are better than the attributed or topic contributed are better than the contributed, typically. But that's not necessarily always true. In terms of sessions that are the most understandable, every section of the American Statistical Association actually sponsors certain sessions. They actually help to organize them. So in particular, for example, sessions that are sponsored by the section on statistical education are typically some of the most understandable, and I highly recommend going to those. And why are they the most understandable? Well, it's because they're talking about how to teach particular topics that pretty much everyone already has had before in a class. That's why they're the most understandable. And I've gotten a lot of good ideas of how to better my teaching from attending corresponding sessions sponsored by this section. Let's see. There's also introductory overview lectures, basically a 2-hour intro to a particular topic. There are continuing education courses. So, for example, I gave a 7 or 8 hour short course. They call them continuing education courses there, but a 7 or 8 hour short course based upon my recently published book. I gave it about a year and a half ago. And so, for example, this is what the actual room looked like at that time. Yes, there were actually people who attended it. This was before everyone actually came in. But basically, what I did there was I just stood there and went through some slides that were projected up here. You know, these continuing education courses can be similar to a lecture and a course, or it can be more like a workshop where the presenter will go over some material and say, okay, I want you to go try it on your own, get out your laptop and try to do it, and I'll circle around the room to help you out. Now, one of the reasons why I want to point to these continuing education courses is that students often get to attend them for free, and this is how. You can volunteer to be what's called a monitor. What that means is that you contact the organizers of JSM, specifically Rick Peterson here, and say, hey, I want to be a monitor. And what you will do is simply, as people come into the continuing education course in the morning, you check off their names to say, hey, yes, they're here. And also you'll give the handouts that the presenters have prepared. And also if the presenter is having maybe some difficulty with the technology, you can go find the JSM staff to go help him or her out. So you get to attend this course essentially for free. But not only that course, when you volunteer as a monitor, you are allowed to attend any other course that you want for free as well, where you don't have any monitor duties associated with it. So we've had a number of our students do this to attend continuing education courses. Yes?
What does the course cost?
Well, for me, it's probably about $500. For a student, without doing that, it is greatly discounted. I want to say it's in the 200s. Now, I wish I would have that cost information available, but once JSM's done, a few weeks later, they take down all the cost information. And you won't have that information available to you until probably like January again. And so preparing this lecture, well, my timing wasn't necessarily the best. So there are a number of feature presentations at JSM. Typically they're in the afternoons, and they will be in very huge rooms that will have room for over 1,000 people, maybe 2,000 people to fit in. There's also the ASA presidential address. So the president of the ASA will give a talk on Tuesday evening about the statistics profession itself. One of the cool things that they do at this this presidential address is at the end of it, they introduce the new ASA fellows. I think I might have talked about being an ASA fellow before, but sorry if I'm repeating myself. But it's basically kind of like the a Hall of Fame. Think of like a sports Hall of Fame, where they honor some people for making a good contribution to a sport. Well, professional societies have their own versions of Hall of Fames, and this is basically what it is. The key difference between a professional society Hall of Fame and a sports Hall of Fame is that if you're in a sports Hall of Fame, you're retired. With a professional Hall of Fame, you're not. You're still working. And so, anyway, so this is at the very end. They will have all the new ASA fellows there, and everyone gather around and take pictures and stuff. I did not take that picture because I was actually standing. Come on. Well, there we go. There I am right there. So a friend of mine took my picture when I became a fellow this summer. There's also this. There will be an exhibit hall, where basically about 90 companies and organizations will exhibit what they do. So all the major book publishers are, and that's one of the big things is that if you want to see what some new books are, you can actually go there and check out the books. So oftentimes when I'm teaching a new course, especially when I teach a new course, I will go here because I know all the books will be available, and I'll try to figure out what book should I use for a course. So for example, right here, I know it's not necessarily the best. This is all CRC Press, one of the 3 big book publishers for statistics with Wiley and Springer. And so there'll be like 90 or so different exhibitors here. There'll be even some that are interested in talking to people about potential jobs as well. This is actually one of the smallest exhibit halls that I've seen. This was a few years ago. That was in Seattle. Usually they're a lot bigger. You might have like a 50-foot high ceiling with it. Also, the poster presentations are typically there. I know it's kind of hard to see, but here are all the poster presentations. There's also a lot of nice tables that you can sit at to have meetings with people. There's also the JSM Career Service, which is obviously very interesting to students. When you're looking for a job, if you want to try to find a job by going to JSM, that's a great way to do it because there are lots and lots of, this is from a recent JSM, 75 different employers will be there interviewing people. So it's a great way to find a job. Do note that you have to pay for it to go through that. And there's also the ASA store where you can get statistical shirts and other stuff like that. So for example, this is my son Keegan when he was about 8 years old, needing a haircut, and I put on him a shirt that I got from the ASA store saying that I'm statistically significant. So after JSM, what should you do? Well, review your activities. Don't let what happens at JSM stay at JSM. Review what you did there. There's going to be probably things that you want to investigate further after JSM. Make note of that. Also, there is a conference proceedings, so that any kind of research presentation that you can give or that you get, you can actually publish a paper associated with it, and it's in the proceedings. Do note that if you do publish there, you can still take that research idea and actually publish it someplace else. These conference proceedings are not peer-reviewed. Basically, whatever you're typing up, it's published there. So you can still publish it someplace else at a later time. And in fact, here's that tablet PC applications in statistics education, part 1 presentation that I did. I actually did a proceedings paper with it. I didn't try to actually get it published anyplace else because statistics education is more difficult to get things published than maybe in other areas because there's a limited number of journals associated with it. So I just decided to do that outlet. Okay. So there's many, many other conferences out there. I'm just going to talk about a few of them briefly here. A key to finding out, well, what are other conferences and when are they being held, is in AMSTAT News. At the back of it, there will always be a list of conferences that are going to be held within the next year or so. So that's a great way to find out about them. So the second biggest conference that's held in the United States or Canada every year are the ENAR meetings. Does anyone remember what ENAR stands for? Eastern. No, you're partially there. Eastern North American region of the International Biometric Society. And at their last one, they had about 1,200 people attended. So a lot of people, or mainly it's people who are interested in biostatistics, will go to this particular conference. It's held about March every year. I'm actually going to go to it this year. And as you might expect, since this is ENAR, it's in the eastern part of the United States it's being held. Usually it's in a warm location. This March is going to be in Washington, D.C. That's their most popular destination, although that's not necessarily a warm place to be in March always. So that needs to be changed to mid-October. They've recently moved up when you have to submit titles and abstracts. And typically the conference starts on a Sunday morning and concludes on a Wednesday around noon. And basically it's like a mini JSM. It's a full conference in terms of you can do interviewing there. There will be short courses, continuing education courses there, and so on. There's a very good student paper competition that they have. And again, if you go on for a PhD and do your dissertation, submit a paper to their student paper competition. I actually, when I was a student, I actually won one of these awards. They give out about 20 awards per year, and they give some money to help you attend the conference. As I say here, these are nicely organized meetings. They're at not necessarily convention centers, but they're at very nice hotels. That's not always true with other conferences. We're running short on time, so I'm going to talk about these other conferences later. Let's talk about the next assignment. Okay, so similar assignment as before. Problem number 1. I want you to develop a budget for attending the next ENAR meetings. So we just briefly talked about ENAR. If you go to the ENAR website, which was located in our last set of notes, you will go there. You will find a link to their corresponding conference. At this conference website, you will see what's called a preliminary program that's available that will give information about, such as how much does it cost to stay in the conference hotel. So what I want you to do is, using that information and additional information as well, come up with a budget so that you can attend the ENAR meetings. Now, unlike being able to have the department pay for membership in the American Statistical Association, I was not able to get the department to pay for your attending the ENAR meetings. Sorry. But I want a detailed budget. Tell me, how much is it going to cost you to be in that conference hotel? How much is transportation going to cost? Find a flight that corresponds to the time that this conference is going to be. Find a flight. How much is it going to cost to get from the airport to the hotel? Well, you might do some researching. When I wrote up the answer key, I just simply did the Metro in D.C., the subway system. I found out what the price would be, but you could take a taxi if you wanted to, or you could walk. It's going to be a long walk. Tell me what the registration fees is. Of course, look at the student registration fees. If you want to attend a short course, go ahead. Put that in the budget. You're not actually paying for this anyway, so go ahead and put it. Budget for food, any other expenses as well. So put together a budget. And I think this is just a good practice to see how much this is going to cost, so that hopefully sometime later as a student, you will actually need to do this for real, so that you can attend one of these conferences. Problem number 2, for the last JSM, complete the following. So, and I unfortunately didn't exactly mention this, but JSM does have a website. How do you find it? Go to the American Statistical Association's website, click on conferences, and you'll see a link to the JSM conference. So on the JSM website, you can find out, or you will see the actual program that's available for the last JSM. I want you to find a presentation that has a member of our department listed as an author. Provide a screen capture for the online information given for this presentation. So, title, the abstract. Part B, for a session that would have interested you to attend, complete the following. Provide a screen capture of the online information given for this session. Explain why the session interests you, and what type of session was this? Was this an invited session? Was it a contributed session? Tell me what it was. And then lastly, for number 2, provide a post or news update example from social media associated with JSM. So for example, you give a Twitter tweet. And lastly, this is the part that I added last night. This corresponds to similar to what you did with Leanne and Michelle. Is basically I want you to come up with a question that you could ask now our next speaker, which will be Pavel, on November 21st. Originally, I thought we would have another assignment before November 21st that you need to turn in, but it's not going to work out that way, so that's why I added this here. Here's some information about Pavel. He's a postdoc right now at NIH in Washington, D.C. So just provide a question there that you didn't necessarily provide on the previous assignment. So that's assignment number 2. Assignment number 4. Are there any questions? Okay. It is 11:50, so we are done for the day.